A long time ago, I had looked at Esther a bit and had found out that they said that there was acrostic, I believe, that some of the letters in Hebrew, if you look, it was taken from, I think it was the last letters on the words, the Hebrew words, spelled Yahweh's name, Jehovah, backward. And so actually his name is all through Esther.
In a hidden way. Also, I didn't get to mention this, but Mordechai, which they say is like, he's like the warrior of Marduk or something. Well, actually, that could also be a shortening of Mara Dachai, which actually means pure myrrh, which is a very powerful and very important essential oil. Remember, frankincense and myrrh was given to Yeshua. And so it's also this idea of him being this pure myrrh, okay? And so that would then be Mara Dachai instead of Mordechai. There's other things that you could do in kind of pulling Mordechai apart and kind of working it out. But again, you're going to see people making the argument that, oh, this is just Marduk. Not necessarily. You know, you can see how so many words and so many things have gotten butchered over the years. You know, you have, and I know Brad Scott has taught this, you know, we can look at English, for example, we have a thing called a butterfly. Well, actually, they were originally called flutterbys, which makes more sense because it kind of flutters by. There's nothing about it that's about it being the butter. What does butter have to do with it? But it's just over time, things sometimes get inverted and rearranged, and then things get called after that kind of an idea. And he had several of these he shared actually on the Torah Made Flesh video, but it was originally they were referred to as flutterbys, and somehow they got turned into butterflies. Okay, there's nothing about flies there, and there's nothing about butter. But you can think of picturing the idea of it fluttering by makes more sense. Same thing with Mordechai or Esther, right? Astir, I mean. Okay, for Esther, how that could be changed and say, oh, Esther, like Easter, Astarte, and all that other stuff, or Marduk. You can see how the jump to make those conclusions could be very easily done.
My question is, our brothers and sisters in Israel, well, not Tel Aviv, but they fast. Thursday was the fast. What is your belief on that? Should we be fasting to be part of Israel? I know it's not scriptural.
No, you can choose to. I mean, Esther commanded a fast as part of the book of Esther, and there are those today that still commemorate by doing the fast of Esther. Okay, and so these are things that you certainly could do. They're not required on any level, but they're things that you can do. I mean, you have also Holocaust Memorial Day, or something Israel does that's a more modern observance that you could join them with on that. There are different things that are national celebrations and decisions that you could do. By the way, we could have a tradition right here at Beth Shalom, or an MTOI tradition, that we may choose to do on a regular basis every year, that we could choose to do and impose on ourselves for, you know, the body, and we could choose to fast or whatever. We can come up with something as long as it doesn't add to Torah. We don't claim it's a Yahweh commandment, and as long as it doesn't undermine or disrupt Torah observance in any way, there would be nothing wrong with it. There would be nothing wrong with it. We could have a tradition. Okay, we could have, for example, and we didn't do it this year. It's the first year we didn't do it, but we had a tradition that every year on the congregation's anniversary, we brought in a praise team to sing and play and lead us in praise. Now, we could have done that every year, and that could have become a tradition that we do. But it would not break Torah, and we would certainly not claim it was Yahweh said to do it. And so, yes, if you wanted to participate in what's known as the fast of Esther, you can. You certainly can.
Has anyone known about Hadassah's family? Why were her parents not alive?
Yeah, no, there doesn't seem to be anything in there. I'm sure that's something that Jewish writers have speculated on, since they've basically speculated on everything that's not actually overtly in Scripture. But I don't see anything that really tells us about Hadassah's family. But again, you know, we can see, and maybe one day I'll do a teaching on the book of Esther, but there's so many things hidden in there and hinted at in there. And Mordechai, even as a Mashiach-like character, and you can see things going on with Esther and the role there of having to stand up and have the courage to walk out what she's been instructed to walk out, and all these different things, in a world that's so against what Abba's doing. There's lots of stuff that we could get out of it, and so perhaps we'll go through that. But there's also a lot of things in Scripture that we just are left silent on. Okay? And that's just what it is. It's just there's silence.
Brandon Chapman's question is it okay to dress up at Purim and for the kids to represent things hidden?
Okay, so it is not appropriate to in any way make Purim seem like Halloween. Okay, so let's not do that. One of the traditions that I was raised with in the Jewish community that I came out of was that children would dress like the characters of the story as part of going through the story. So they would only dress that way when they came together. The one thing that we have an understanding of tradition-wise is that on Purim, you would read the story of Esther. And during the story, the children, to help enjoy the story and understand and relate to the characters, would often dress as Esther or Mordechai or Haman or King Achashverosh or Vashti or whoever. So you have people dressing up in the roles, but it's part of only the storytelling. Okay, it's not for going out and making this look like Halloween. And they're only dressing like the characters of the story. And so that's how that would play out. And of course, then we have our own, it's so funny. I always remembered when I first started seeing how Esther was going on, all my life being raised with it. And then all of a sudden, as a teenager, there was this thing called Rocky Horror Picture Show, which audience participated in the movie. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, they got that from Purim. Because we read the story of Esther, and we boo at the right times, and we say yay at the right times, and we have the audience participate. We did that centuries before they ever came out with anything else, And so some of you are thinking, what is he talking about? But that's okay. The rest of you know. But the thing is that the things to do on Easter, and I'm trying to get us not doing the Halloween thing, the book of Esther, the things that we want to do in reading the book of Esther is that's the only time that I would say be appropriate if you want to let the children to dress up, but they're dressing up like the characters. We are not turning it into Halloween. Okay? Let's not do that, please.
What does the Bible mean about avoiding man-made traditions, and doesn't Purim fall within that? And they're referencing Mark 7:8. I believe it's a context problem here.
Okay. Mark 7 is all about understanding that. Okay, that's really the chapter for all this. I have a teaching called Kashrut in Context, which I think I deal with Mark 7. But let me just answer that question really quickly here. Mark 7, let's understand what's going on here. First of all, there is a man-made tradition that Yeshua is addressing in chapter 7 and very much at the beginning where it's in verse 2. And by the way, he never says there's anything wrong with the tradition. Now, let's understand Mark 7 teaches us Yeshua's true position on traditions. His position is simple. If your tradition is elevated to be equal to Torah, that's a problem. If your tradition, this is man-made traditions, is used to undermine or override a Torah command, it's a problem. That's the only two things. So in verse 2, it says, "And seeing some of his taught ones eat bread with defiled, that is, with unwashed hands, they found fault." There is a man-made tradition called Nitilat Yadayim, which is where that's the prayer you say over. That's not what it's called. But anyway, it's the washing of the hands. All right? And they take a pitcher of water in a bowl, and you pour once on the left and once on the right and once on the left. And there's a ritual to this. Apparently, his disciples did not do this. And it says that the Pharisees and some of the scribes assembled had a problem with that. Now, nowhere in Mark chapter 7 do you see him say, well, that's because it's a dumb tradition and you don't have to do it. That just doesn't appear anywhere in Mark chapter 7. What he says is, why are you bothering my students? Because it says here in verse 5, it says, why do your students not walk according to the tradition of the elders? And he said to them, Well did Yeshayahu prophesy concerning you hypocrites? It says, his people respect me with their lips, with their hearts far away. It says, in vain do they teach to worship me, teachings as commands of men. In other words, they are trying to take men's commandments and make them Yahweh's commandments. In other words, he said to them, my students didn't break a Torah command, they just didn't do a tradition. So let's understand that that's why it's okay for you to have family traditions. You may have a traditional way you start Sabbath. Maybe your family all sits together. My wife's family all got together, and they would sit in the living room, and they would read a verse or two, and then they would pray. That's how they start the Sabbath. And they had a way of ending the Sabbath. By the way, there's no verse anywhere telling you that you need to, quote, open the Sabbath or close the Sabbath. Zero Torah commands about that. But if you have a tradition that helps you to remember to start on time and to end before you start doing back in the cares of the world, back into the real, quote unquote, the real world after the isolation of the shalom of Sabbath. Well, while you're going through all that, if you have a tradition that helps bookmark the time, those are good traditions. Just to make sure you haven't turned it into a Torah command. Because there are no Torah commands for opening and closing the Sabbath. So that's really what we have to understand. And then he goes forward, he says, look, and by the way, he says, in verse 9, he says, well, do you set aside the command of Elohim in order to guard your tradition? Now he says, there's this command where you guys have a tradition and you use it to go against and break a Torah command. He says, this tradition that you have it says, for Moses said, respect your father and your mother, and he who curses father and mother, let him be put to death. But you say, if a man says to his father and mother, whatever profit you might have received from me is korban, that is an offering for the temple, you no longer let him do any matter at all for his father and his mother, nullifying the word of Elohim through your tradition, which you have handed down, and many such you have. Let's be careful that we're not just backlashing on all traditions. It's not complicated. If the tradition is elevated to be considered a Yahweh commanded thing when it is not, that's a problem. Secondly, if the tradition interferes with, overrides, or causes any kind of problem with a Torah command, that's a problem. Otherwise, your traditions are fine. Some of you pray before your meals, probably most of you. Show me that commandment anywhere. There's no commandment to do that. I've seen some of you smack your kids because they started eating before you prayed. Now, I appreciate that you want them to respect mama and daddy, by not doing what they told, but let's make sure that you're not trying to convince them that they broke the Torah in some way. Now, it's important that they have respect that that's your house rule. Let's not teach anybody something's Torah when it's not. Do we all understand that now? Hopefully the guy whoever was online understands that too. And that's why I read the verse that said the fast of the 4th, the fast of the 5th, and the 7th, and the 10th. That's Abba endorsing traditions. Because those are traditional observances except for the 7th month that are nowhere commanded.
All right, Monica wants to know, are you saying costumes at other times for other reasons is not okay as well?
No, look, the thing is this. If your kids want to play dress up, everybody has kids, especially daughters that like to play dress up. And even the boys sometimes like to play dress up, whatever it is they want to do. Okay, as far as, superheroes and pirates, whatever boys do. Nothing wrong with playing dress up. We're not doing things that are linked to pagan observances like Halloween. So we're not going to run out there on the streets, which, by the way, you'll see the Jewish community doing all of this, which I understand, and it was disgusting to see when it was in one of the videos I watched on Purim, showing some of the things that the Jewish community is doing, for Purim. It is definitely a disgusting thing to see. But we are not wanting to have anything our children do be connected in any way to something like Halloween. Okay, we're not trying to replace their Halloween with something else. All right? My daughter has always been very much the princess. I've always had her as my princess, and she has often, as a child, dressed up as a princess and on any given day of the week when she was little. Okay? No problem with that, and we had outfits for her to put on, and she could walk around and pretend to be a princess. So she wasn't knocking on any doors getting candy. She wasn't parading around in the streets doing any other frivolity. She just was pretending to be a princess. And so that would be perfectly okay if your children want to, put on some costumes and have play pretend and whatever they want to do. I have no problem with that. Let's not link it to anything that has to do with the book or anything that's done by pagans. Just not linking it is what is the key here.
Purim question, this also relates to Shabbat and other holidays, etc. Could you somehow cover what to do for a Purim celebration so as not to be one doing the pagan rituals? How do you celebrate Purim?
Okay, excellent. The thing that we used to do with our tradition here, and in the Jewish synagogues, this is what they do. they simply get together and they read the book of Esther to remember the events, to commemorate the events, and they celebrate as a joyful, because remember it's a story that was very scary that had a very happy ending. And so they celebrate and they rejoice and they have food and drink and they have a great time. So it would be very appropriate for you to read the book of Esther, which we normally would do, but because we're going to put on the play, we're not going to read it, we're going to perform it. But it would be perfectly appropriate for a congregation to get together, or a family to get together, read the story. Now, one of the things is a tradition is to eat something called hamantashen, which is a triangular pastry with like a fruit jelly inside of it, like a prune or apricot or poppy seed or whatever, all kinds of different things you can put in it. And these are supposed to either be like Haman's hats, or the Hebrew actually is Haman's ears, but like these little triangle things. And so they eat that. I always often guess that might have been where the phrase, if that happens, I'll eat my hat. Well, here we are eating Haman's hats. I don't know. But that's one of the traditional food dishes. By the way, we have a cookbook put out by the ladies of MTOI that have meal and food recommendations for all observances, including Purim. And so you have recipes in the cookbook. Please don't go online and try to buy it while it's still Shabbat, but we do have it on our website. Don't do that today. So hopefully that answers the question. It would be perfectly appropriate to gather together, read the story, and then have a fellowship meal and celebrate.